Welcome to DeenReport. For Muslims, by Muslims. This is your weekly roundup. The biggest stories of the week and what they mean for Muslim communities around the world. Let's get into it.
In India, police in Telangana have registered an FIR after a public meeting in Hyderabad's Balapur area, following a complaint that alleged speeches promoted hostility toward Muslims and made inflammatory references to Rohingya refugees. Reports say 4 people were named in the case, including C.S. Rangarajan, identified as the head priest of the Chilka Balaji temple, along with MRPS leader Ravi Kumar, advocate Karuna Sagar Kashim Shetty, and Gurda Swami Shastri. The case has drawn attention because the gathering had earlier received conditional permission from the Telangana High Court, with reported limits on timing and crowd size and directions to avoid provocative or hate speech. An FIR is the start of an investigation, not a conviction, and those named can contest the allegations as investigators review recordings and witness accounts. For many Muslim residents, the key question is whether institutions will act consistently to protect community safety and public order. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. In Malaysia, a visually impaired teacher is challenging assumptions about disability and leadership by opening a small Tahfiz school for boys under 12. Muhammad Hafizul Sham, Muhammad Hanafiya, says the goal is simple: teach Quranic recitation and memorization, and show the community that blind Malaysians can build institutions, not just fit into the narrow jobs people expect. He teaches using Braille Qurans and digital tools, but his story also highlights a bigger issue many families face. Accessible learning resources can be bulky, hard to obtain, or expensive, especially electronic Braille devices. Supporters say the center brings Quranic learning closer to families and normalizes inclusion in religious education. Advocates say the wider lesson is about investment, training, affordability, and long-term support. So inclusive faith education isn't dependent on personal sacrifice. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. In India's Uttarakhand, what started as a dispute over a shop sign has escalated into protests, police cases, and growing concern about community safety. Reports say an elderly Muslim shopkeeper in Kodwa was pressured to remove the word Baba from his shop's name, with activists arguing he shouldn't use it. A local gym owner stepped in and challenged them, and a short video of the confrontation went viral, especially the moment he said, "My name is Mohammed Deepak," which he later explained as a statement about equality before the law. After the clip spread, he said he faced intimidation and threats, while police registered multiple FIRs based on different complaints from different sides. Key allegations remain disputed as investigations continue, but for many Muslim traders, the bigger question is whether daily business can continue without pressure or fear when identity becomes the target. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. In Sweden, a 22-year-old Muslim woman says she was denied a security guard job after a recruiter told her she could not wear a hijab with the company uniform, even though she says she had progressed through tests and interviews and believed she was close to being hired. The company has not discussed the specific details of her application publicly, but it has issued a written statement saying it welcomes the debate and will review its uniform policy, while stressing diversity and inclusion. The dispute is now bigger than one job interview. It raises a question many Muslims, especially women, recognize across Europe. When a headscarf is treated as incompatible with neutral professional appearance, does that become a barrier to stable work and equal opportunity? Sweden's discrimination law bans unfair treatment in recruitment and also covers policies that appear neutral but may disproportionately affect a faith group unless they're justified and applied consistently. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. Indonesia's Aceh province is still rebuilding after the floods and landslides that hit parts of Sumatra in late 2025. In one highland community, the Tinggi village in Gayo Lues, residents are now working side by side with Indonesian army troops to build a temporary mosque so daily prayers and community life can continue while homes, roads, and basic services are repaired. Indonesian media reports say the same unit has also helped with clean water access, small electrical repairs at a local clinic, school cleanups, and basic health outreach. Supporters see the mosque build as a practical act of solidarity, especially in a region where faith spaces often double as community hubs after crisis. At the same time, wider recovery raises ongoing questions that matter to affected families: how fast temporary housing will be completed, how aid is tracked, and whether local voices stay central in rebuilding decisions. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. The Palestinian Authority says Israeli settlers entered the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound 4,397 times in January, warning of a growing push to change the long-standing status quo at one of Islam's holiest sites. Palestinian officials say some visits were accompanied by Israeli officials and included actions they describe as provocative inside the compound. Israel has not immediately responded to the January figures, and the data is difficult to verify independently because entry and policing are controlled by Israeli authorities. The report comes as Palestinians in occupied East Jerusalem describe rising pressure from evictions and demolitions in areas close to the old city, including Silwan, while UN humanitarian reporting continues to track displacement linked to demolitions and permit enforcement. With Ramadan approaching, access to Al-Aqsa remains a sensitive flashpoint for Muslims worldwide, where questions of worship, dignity, and equal treatment carry deep meaning. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. In the United States, 2 Republican lawmakers are facing backlash after posting comments calling for deportations of Muslims and even possible citizenship revocations. The remarks, circulated widely online, were condemned by Muslim civil rights advocates and some lawmakers who warned that targeting an entire faith community fuels Islamophobia and puts ordinary families at risk. Critics say the language treats millions of Muslim Americans as outsiders, despite constitutional protections for religious freedom and long-standing legal limits on stripping citizenship. The Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus and civil rights groups urge political leaders to reject the rhetoric, arguing it can spill into real-world harm, like harassment, threats, and pressure on mosques and Muslim institutions. Supporters of the lawmakers frame the posts as security-driven, but opponents say security cannot justify collective punishment. The debate is now intensifying as advocacy groups push for accountability. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. UK police have arrested a 47-year-old man after an overnight arson attack at the Islamic Centre of England in Maida Vale, London. Officers say the incident happened just after midnight on Tuesday, when 2 flammable objects were allegedly thrown into the grounds, damaging a cabin and a parked vehicle. The flames went out before emergency crews arrived, and police say no one was injured and the main building was not damaged. The Met says the suspect left the scene in a car, and detectives arrested a man within hours on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life. Local leaders say the attack is distressing for nearby residents and worrying for Muslims who already feel targeted when religious spaces are attacked. Camden Council says extra patrols will be in place for reassurance, while police urge everyone to remain calm and avoid escalation as they investigate what happened and why. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. Police in England are investigating after racially aggravated graffiti was sprayed onto a mosque building on Main Road in the Pinho area of Exeter overnight, between January 30 and 31. Devon and Cornwall police say the incident has been recorded as a hate crime. The graffiti has been removed, and officers are asking anyone with information to come forward. Police have urged witnesses, including anyone with CCTV or doorbell footage from the area, to contact them on 101 or through the Force website. For local Muslims, even when paint is cleaned away, vandalism aimed at a place of worship can leave a lingering sense of fear and uncertainty, especially for families attending prayers and community events. This case also comes amid wider concern about anti-Muslim abuse in England and Wales, with official statistics and monitoring groups reporting rises in recent years. Police have not named a suspect, and no arrest has been announced, but the appeal remains active as investigators work to identify who was responsible. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. In India's Chhattisgarh state, police are investigating a violent mob attack that targeted Muslim homes in a village in Garhwal district. Reports say a crowd vandalized and set fire to multiple houses and vehicles as Muslim families, including women and children, sheltered inside. Several police personnel were injured as officers formed protective lines and evacuated residents to safety, with some accounts also describing children being moved from a nearby madrasa area during the unrest. The incident followed earlier allegations of assaults and robberies involving 3 young men, one reportedly linked to a prior temple desecration case. But the retaliation appears to have widened into collective punishment against local Muslim households. Authorities have registered cases, increased deployments, and say they are reviewing footage to identify those responsible. For Muslim communities, the key questions now are protection, accountability, and whether justice will be applied without fear or favor. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. Israel's military says it has selected Major Ella Waweya, a Muslim Arab officer known online as Captain Ella, to become its next Arabic language spokesperson, replacing longtime spokesman Avichai Adre after about 2 decades. Israeli reports say she will be promoted when she formally takes up the role. The Arabic language spokesperson is one of the Army's most influential public-facing positions, shaping messages aimed at Palestinians and wider Arabic-speaking audiences across the region, especially during wartime, when statements can include military claims, warnings, and public guidance. Supporters describe Waweya's appointment as a milestone for representation inside Israel's institutions. But for many Palestinians and Muslims watching the Gaza war, the role is deeply controversial because it is tied to how military narratives are promoted while civilians face devastating consequences. The key issue now is what changes tone, language, and accountability, and how Arabic-speaking audiences respond in the weeks ahead. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. Newly released U.S. records tied to the Epstein files are prompting anger and disbelief after reports cited email correspondence describing how 3 pieces of the Ka'ba's Kiswa cloth were arranged for shipment from Makkah in 2017, routed through intermediaries linked to the UAE, and delivered to locations associated with Jeffrey Epstein. The reporting says the emails discuss the cloth's spiritual meaning and even describe it as having been touched by millions of pilgrims, while also laying out shipment logistics and customs classification. What remains unclear is why Epstein wanted the items, how the pieces were obtained, and whether any permissions existed for removal or export. The controversy is unfolding alongside a massive Justice Department document release that has also drawn criticism over redactions and victim privacy. For many Muslims, the central issue is accountability. Who handled sacred material, on what authority, and why it ended up in the hands of a man associated with serious abuse. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. New York police say a Staten Island woman is facing hate crime charges after 3 alleged attacks in Brooklyn's Bay Ridge neighborhood that investigators describe as anti-Muslim. Authorities say the incidents happened within minutes of each other on January 30th, and that the victims were Muslim females wearing hijab, including a 12-year-old girl. Police accounts cited by local outlets allege the suspect made hostile remarks and told victims to go back to their country as she assaulted them. For Muslim communities, cases like this raise urgent questions about safety in public spaces, especially for women and children whose faith is visible. Community advocates say reporting, support for victims, and consistent accountability matter, not only for justice in one case, but to prevent copycat harassment and normalize the idea that Muslims belong and deserve protection like anyone else. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. A court in England has convicted a Leeds man of hate crimes after prosecutors said he desecrated multiple copies of the Quran inside a hospital multi-faith prayer room at St. James's Hospital, causing damage and distress in a space used by patients, visitors, and staff. The Crown Prosecution Service said the man smashed a framed Islamic scripture, tore out and burned pages, and used damaged material to block a sink and toilet. Prosecutors say he returned weeks later to cause further blockages, and when he tried to enter the room again, it had been locked due to the earlier damage. He was detained by hospital security and arrested by police. While in custody, prosecutors said he wrote anti-Semitic graffiti on a cell wall, with the CPS describing the conduct as targeting both Muslim and Jewish communities. The case has renewed concerns about safety, dignity, and respect in shared public spaces, especially in hospitals. Sentencing is expected later this month. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. Palestinian officials say Israeli forces raided the Al-Tahadi school in the Ibzik area of the northern Jordan Valley in the occupied West Bank, damaging classrooms and disrupting essential services students rely on. Wafa cited the Tubas education director, who said educational materials were confiscated and key networks like water and electricity were damaged, while Anadolu Agency reported a Palestinian Education Ministry statement describing the incident as a repeat raid and saying access routes were also obstructed. There was no immediate public statement from the Israeli military in the sources reviewed, and independent verification can be difficult in restricted areas. But local residents and rights groups have long warned that repeated pressure in communities like Ibzik can make normal schooling impossible. For families, this isn't only about property damage. It's about whether children can reach class safely, drink clean water, and learn without fear. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. A viral livestream clip is driving big debate today after UK rapper Central C appeared to say he has taken the Shahada and embraced Islam. The footage, widely reposted across platforms, is being treated by many accounts as confirmation. But the public evidence so far is mainly short edits and reposts, not a formal statement. That matters because faith is deeply personal, and Muslims online are warning against turning conversion into entertainment or gossip. At the same time, many are welcoming any sincere step toward Islam and urging people to respond with dignity and respect. In the UK, where Muslim communities can face misinformation and Islamophobia, careful verification is essential before headlines harden into fact. DeenReport has reviewed the circulating clips and credible background reporting to separate what's supported by the available footage from what remains unclear. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. In India's western city of Ahmedabad, a mosque opened its water facilities to local residents, Hindu and Muslim alike, after disruptions to municipal supply reportedly left some households struggling for water. Videos shared online showed families lining up with containers, including women, children, and elderly residents, as the mosque allowed people to fill up without questions about identity. Local coverage quoted a mosque official saying basic necessities should not come with conditions, and residents described relief at being able to bring water home for their families. The moment has drawn attention because it highlights community-level cooperation during a civic problem that many Indian cities face: aging infrastructure, contamination risks, and uneven supply pressure. It also lands in a wider social context where Muslim public life is often scrutinized, making simple acts of service both meaningful and closely watched. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. In India's Jharkhand state, 3 Muslim schoolboys were attacked on campus by classmates and several outsiders, raising urgent questions about school safety and accountability. One of the injured boys, identified in local reporting as Abrar Ansari, described hearing hostile slogans tied to their Muslim identity before the situation escalated into violence inside the school grounds. Local reports say the boys suffered injuries, including head wounds, and later spoke to reporters while still wearing blood-stained uniforms. The students have also alleged that teachers present did not step in to stop the assault, an allegation that has intensified community concern about supervision and emergency response procedures. What remains unclear so far is what official action has been taken, including whether any arrests or disciplinary measures followed, because authorities have not publicly released detailed findings. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. In the Netherlands, the national privacy regulator has fined 10 municipalities a total of €250,000 after finding they secretly processed sensitive personal data tied to investigations into Muslim communities. Each municipality received a €25,000 fine. Dutch reporting says outside researchers were commissioned to map mosque networks and community structures, and some files reportedly included religious details and other personal information, collected without people being told they were being assessed. Authorities also said some reports were shared beyond local government, including with police and the National Counterterrorism Coordinator, raising questions about oversight and safeguards. The story traces back to covert force field-style analyses that surfaced publicly in 2021. And it still matters today because trust is hard to rebuild once communities feel singled out. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. New Zealand's Court of Appeal is set to begin a 5-day hearing from February 9th to 13th, 2026, in a case that many Muslims around the world still associate with deep loss and lasting trauma: the Christchurch mosque shootings. The convicted attacker is asking the court to let him undo his guilty pleas he entered in 2020 to 51 murders, 40 attempted murders, and a terrorism charge. The court's own case synopsis says the main question is whether those pleas should be vacated, including claims that prison conditions were so inhumane that he was incapable of making rational decisions at the time. If the pleas remain, a later hearing would consider any sentence appeal. If they are thrown out, the case could return to the High Court for trial. For victims' families and survivors, the legal process can feel like reopening a wound, yet the court must still test whether the legal threshold is met. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com. Colorado has agreed to pay $245,000 to settle a lawsuit brought by Tajuddin Ashahid, a Muslim man who said prison intake staff forced him to shave his beard in 2016 despite his religious objections. Reporting on the case says he warned that shaving would violate a core part of his faith, but was told he could be disciplined and placed in solitary confinement if he refused. The dispute became a years-long legal fight over whether a correction sergeant ignored an existing religious exemption and whether the threat and order reflected discrimination or a claimed mistake. The settlement closes the case, but it also highlights a wider issue for Muslim communities: whether religious accommodations in prisons are applied consistently, especially during high-pressure intake moments where people have little ability to challenge orders. Civil rights advocates say these cases matter because they test how constitutional protections work behind bars, and whether dignity and equal treatment are more than just words on paper. For full coverage, visit DeenReport.com.
Thanks for watching Deen Report. For Muslims, by Muslims. That's your weekly roundup of the biggest stories of the week affecting Muslims. We'll be back with daily updates and next week's roundup. For full reporting, visit DeenReport.com.